Prime Minister Takaichi wants to spend 370 trillion yen. The government's own numbers say she doesn't have enough people to spend it well. That's not a footnote. That's the story. Takaichi's cabinet has approved a long-term blueprint for public-private investment across 17 strategic sectors: AI, semiconductors, quantum technology, defense, biotech, shipbuilding. The claim is that this level of government-directed capital will double Japan's real gross domestic product growth rate from 0.7% a year over the last decade to 1.4% through 2040. The pitch even includes knock-on economic benefits running up to 20 times the investment itself. Meanwhile, that same policy apparatus forecasts a shortfall of 6.4 million workers by 2030. Not by 2040, when the growth plan is supposed to have paid off. By 2030, while these 17 sectors are still standing up their supply chains, training their engineers, and competing for the same shrinking labor pool as everyone else in the economy. Most of the coverage treats this as two separate stories: an ambitious growth plan and a demographic headwind Japan has been managing for years. I'd argue they're the same story, and the government is only telling half of it. Let's talk about the assumption nobody is examining. Every strategy rests on assumptions. The real work of strategy isn't picking a bold target, it's identifying which assumptions that target depends on, and testing whether they actually hold. I've made this argument before with individual companies. Firms that get blindsided by supply chain shocks or geopolitical shifts usually aren't victims of surprise. They're victims of assumptions they never stopped to examine because those assumptions were convenient, and nobody in the room had an incentive to challenge them. Takaichi's plan runs on one large, convenient, unexamined assumption: that capital deployed into a sector converts into growth more or less independently of who is actually available to do the work. 370 trillion yen goes in. Human capital sorts itself out. 1.4% growth comes out the other end. That assumption does not survive contact with the government's own labor data. Semiconductors, defense, biotech. These aren't sectors where you can paper over a talent shortfall with automation or overtime. They require specialized engineers, doctorates, and multi-year training pipelines. That's precisely the kind of labor that's hardest to manufacture on demand and slowest to scale. So what's the government's answer? AI-driven productivity and workforce upskilling. Fair enough as a direction, but upskilling a workforce for advanced semiconductor fabrication or quantum research is a multi-year undertaking, and these sectors need that talent now, not in 2032. This is a timing mismatch dressed up as a solution. It's the policy equivalent of promising a client a delivery date your production schedule can't actually support. Technically a plan, not actually a plan. I see a version of this constantly in client organizations. A growth target gets set. Resourcing gets waved at in general terms. And the organization discovers 18 months later that the constraint was never capital. It was always people. The ones you have, the ones you can hire, and the ones you can actually develop in the time available. Companies that get this right build the workforce plan first and size the ambition to match it. Companies that get it wrong announce the ambition and hope the workforce plan catches up. Takaichi's blueprint reads like the second kind. And here's the part that should really concern you. Domestic upskilling is slow, there's a faster lever available, skilled immigration, and instead of pulling it, the government is actively tightening it. The engineer, specialist in humanities, international services visa, historically the fastest route for foreign technical talent into Japan, now requires passing the Level 2 Japanese language proficiency test, no small feat, as of April 2026. That is precisely the visa category through which semiconductor, AI, and biotech talent would enter the country. Permanent residency eligibility has been pushed back from a 3-year to a 5-year visa requirement, effective April 2027, lengthening the runway before skilled foreign hires can even commit to staying. And the business manager visa's investment threshold has sextupled to 30 million yen, raising the bar for the foreign entrepreneurs and executives who'd build these businesses in the first place, not just the engineers who'd staff them. This isn't neglect. This is active throttling, running in parallel with a growth plan that depends on exactly the talent pool it's restricting. A company that announced an aggressive hiring target while simultaneously making its own hiring process slower and more restrictive would not be praised for ambition. It would be asked, reasonably, whether anyone in the room had connected the two decisions. That is the question Takaichi's growth blueprint has not answered. So, what does this mean if you're running a business here? If you're a foreign executive watching this from outside the policy apparatus, that 370 trillion yen headline looks like a market signal. 17 sectors the state has decided to backstop, presumably worth positioning around. That's the wrong read. The more reliable signal is sitting underneath the headline. The government's own labor projections don't close the gap the plan requires, and its own visa policy is actively narrowing one of the fastest ways to close it. That's not an oversight to wait out. That's the state of the constraint, for as long as the current policy stance holds. And the gap between announcement and execution is where the real conditions of the next 5 years get set, not in the press release. Practically, that means two things. First, don't take the 17-sector list as a guarantee of supply. Treat it as a guarantee of demand for talent that doesn't yet exist, and that's getting harder, not easier, to import. That tells you exactly where wage pressure and competition for skilled staff will concentrate. Second, if your business touches any of these sectors, your own workforce plan needs to be more rigorous than the government's, not less. Because you'll be competing with a state-backed initiative for the same finite pool of people, under immigration rules working against you rather than for you. And we have the budget was never the hard part. Capital is not a strategy. A workforce plan that can actually deliver the target inside the constraints the government has itself imposed, that's the strategy. Everything else is ambition wearing a strategy's clothes. So let me ask you the same question I'm asking Tokyo. Does your workforce plan meet the demands of your growth strategy, or is it ambition in disguise? Good strategies answer questions of what, why, how, and when. But in many cases, the most important question is who.